Hello, my name is Angel Sanchez, and I'm about to provide you with a tutorial on how to create a database, generate database information. So we're not going to go and find a specific database, we're actually going to randomly generate it. And then we're going to make an ER model, and then we're going to join two tables together. So I'll provide you with that information. This is primarily for someone who's trying to become a data analyst, and they're trying to gain some experience or some understanding of how SQL comes into play in their field. And basically, this part of it, creating it, is more of something that a database administrator would do. What I plan on doing going forward is connecting this to some data visualization tools such as Power BI or Tableau, and then making visualizations from the data that we generate. So just starting out, you're going to connect to your database. Nothing complicated here. Just put localhost. We're just trying to get through this part. If this is not the most professional way to do it, just keep in mind I'm not trying to show you how to be a database administrator. I'm just trying to populate a server with information so that way you can make queries off of it. So we'll just connect to this, and we'll start by creating a new database. We'll go to our database folder. So right click here, new database, and we're just going to name it SQL tutorial. It doesn't really matter what you call this, just make sure that you know what it is. So just name it whatever you'd like. The name doesn't really matter, and just select OK. So now we have our database called SQL tutorial, and what we want to do is create tables, but we need to generate our data first. So in order to generate our data, we're actually going to start by designing our database. We're actually not going to use MS SQL for this, or Microsoft SQL for this. We're going to use Excel. So I'm just going to open up a new document here, and we're going to save it. So let's just make this for a store, because that's what I did for the other ones. When you're designing a database, you don't have to follow this process, but if you want to just have a streamlined process, know exactly where the relationships lie before you start putting in the data, this is a good way to represent conceptually, I believe it's called the conceptual phase, I guess you could technically say, of designing a database. So, if we're making a store, it's, common sense, we're going to have customers. We're going to have orders, we'll just say orders, shipping information, because you're going to have customers' shipping address and companies that will ship out the products, and then you're going to have a product table. So right now we're just creating the concepts of each table that we're going to create. Category, what type of category your product is. Address, so this goes for the customer address. And each company or each database administrator will approach this differently. They'll have a requirements document that they go by. We don't really care about that, because we're just trying to get some fake data into a database just to manipulate it, so that way we can analyze it. You don't even have to do this process. You can skip ahead and just find a database that you like, preferably something that is related to each other, so that way you can try to make primary keys, so that way you can join two tables together. That's the main thing we're trying to do here. We're just trying to join two tables together. So for customers, you're going to have a customer ID. For orders, you're going to have an order ID. For shipping, you're going to have a shipping ID. We're just going to populate all of this, so don't have to painstakingly explain each category. Address ID, payments ID. We're going to populate this very quickly. We're not going to be too concerned about whether or not it's the best design, because again, if this isn't actually something that's going towards enterprise or some type of business, then it's okay if it's not perfect. Customer, presumably you're going to have email, phone number, first name, last name, and then address ID would be the foreign key. You just put it in there. This is just to get an idea of what that is. We'll move on to orders. You might have fulfillment status if it's an e-commerce store, if it's unfulfilled or fulfilled. You want to have your product ID in there too as a foreign key, and payment ID, because all of that information has to be where orders is. Shipping ID. So it might not look like it now, but this is going to be sort of an intermediate table where everything is connected with everything. It's going to be like the final stop where all keys are connected, and this is to just make sure that nothing is recursive, nothing is related with itself. We don't want anything related with itself. So we'll move on to shipping. So for shipping, you might have a tracking number. Spread this out. What date the orders were shipped, shipping date, and then a shipping company. Product, we're going to be very vague with our database because we don't want to make something too specific because this is just an example. So product name, it can be a generic product. Product image, if it's on a website, you want to have an image, and this will just be a URL that you can generate. The price of the product, the stock, how much is available, and then we got another foreign key here, category ID. So we'll move on to category. If this is a grocery store, or if this is a hardware store, for example, it can be, aluminum, metal, wood, plastic. Category description, that can be a string of text, and then category image, so it can be displayed. Moving on to address, we're going to name the actual line of the address column, or I guess field, address 1. It's probably not the best practice. The only reason I'm doing that is because the table itself is named address, and I don't want to get confused when I'm making the queries down the line. Cities, we did country, city, state, and then zip. And then finally, we're going to be on our payments table. So payment type, Visa, MasterCard, expiration date. Okay. Let me just clear formats from that. So now we have customers table, orders table, shipping, product, category, address, payments. So what we want to do with this now is make the actual tables. It'll include the table name, the columns, what data type they are, where the primary keys are, and where the foreign keys are. So what I like to do is just to spread them out. So copy this whole chunk of data, maybe space it out 2 away from each other. Two away from each other. Payment ID. Okay. We can just remove this now. We don't need this anymore. Shift cells up. Okay. And I probably should just move this. This is going to be about 3 columns long, so I'll just move this here. Okay. So I like to start by selecting 3 rows and then choosing the color. Just make sure it's a unique color that you can distinguish each table by. Put green for this one. Start to run out, you can just use these. We'll do like a darker blue, and then address we'll do like a lime green. And then, so what I like to do is merge and center each of these spots. Merge and center, and then just select all of this. Make it a table, make it a tiny little table, because we're trying to conceptually represent these things. So basically what we're going to do is in this table we're going to have the column name, in this table we're going to have the data type, and then we're going to have the entity integrity in this table, in this column I should say. So starting out with customer, we'll actually worry about the data type later, but we're just going to automatically assume, or not so much assume,